Welcome to my 2021 college football season preview of the Sun Belt Conference, the final conference that I'm previewing as part of this series where I previewed all 10 FBS conferences. My next video will be previewing the independents, but this is the last conference that I am looking at. A very exciting year for the Sun Belt. A lot of things on the horizon that look very bright for this conference. Yes, Cincinnati was the highest ranked group of 5 team overall in the AP poll, but they were also the only American Athletic Conference team to get into the AP poll. Sun Belt was able to notch 2 teams in the top 25, which gives them the most teams in the top 25 of any group of 5 team. Coastal Carolina and Louisiana, both teams that are going to compete for that New Year's Six game, be in the running for sure for that New Year's Six bowl bid. I'm very, very excited about this. Make sure that you like and subscribe. I'm going to do this video. I'm going to go through. I'm going to predict the overall records for each of these teams, and I'm going to go through the end and predict order of finish. But I also have a video coming out shortly after this series is done where I'm going to predict the race for the New Year's Six, talk about the teams in contention for that, and which team I ultimately think is going to take that slot for the New Year's Six. So make sure you like and subscribe. It's not all Boise State content. I do regular college football content as well. Like I said in all these my videos, I just say this real quick. The reason I started doing this series is because every year of the last 4 or 5, it might even be 6 years. I think I've actually misspoken the other ones. Anyhow, over the last 4 or 6 years, I've gone through the Athlon Sports magazine on my own, and I've filled out what I think is going to be the record of each team. At the end of the season, I've gone back and I've checked myself, and every year I've been better than Athlon, and I figured it was time to get it out on the channel. Now, this is going to be the hardest season to predict of any college football season, just because of the way that COVID really wrecked things across all teams, impacting how those teams trained, impacting how many games they played, either due to game cancellations or through conference policies. So it is difficult to analyze across the board. So I fully expect there to be a few teams here that I'm off on. A team that I say is going to be great might end up being terrible. A team that I say is going to be terrible might surprise me and be middling to good. But I think overall I'm hoping to be as consistent as usual, so let's jump right in. Okay, so the first team we're looking at, Appalachian State, has perennially been a pretty, well, I wouldn't say perennially, but recently has been one of those top teams in the Sun Belt, especially in 2019 where they went 13-1. Last season repeated with another good year, 9-3, although they did end up losing out for that top Sun Belt spot just because of the rise of Coastal Carolina and Louisiana, but Coastal Carolina primarily who won the Sun Belt last year. So great season overall by the Sun Belt teams. Really was a fantastic year. Last season, I expect good things this year as well. Athlon Sports is projecting 8-4, 5-3, and while I do think that this is an Appalachian State team returning 9 starters on defense and 8 on offense, including the starting running back, although I think this is an Appalachian State team that might be able of achieving beyond that, I am going to stick with Athlon on this one and say 8-4, 5-3 for myself. Also, I think that they'll have a couple of disappointing losses, lose a game that they definitely shouldn't down the stretch. I'll preview their schedule here in a second, but losing their starting quarterback there is going to be huge for them, I think. Chase Bryce, getting his first crack at replacing Zach Thomas there, who was just an incredible quarterback for the Mountaineers. So looking at this schedule, non-conference-wise, it goes a little bit tough here. Playing East Carolina shouldn't be too bad. That should be a win. But Miami, Florida is going to be a very, very tough matchup. A game that I think Miami might be overlooking. A game that I think Appalachian State has a chance here. And if they had Zach Thomas, I wowould give them pretty good odds of potentially going in and winning that one. But right now, with Chase Bryce unproven, coming back, his Athlon Sports has Malik. So Malik Williams here as the leading passer, but Chase Bryce coming back in as the Trevor Lawrence's backup there, a good quarterback coming in, but unproven, someone who really hasn't gotten a chance to prove himself here for the Mountaineers, adapting to the offense as it is. I think they are going to drop this game to Miami. I think that they can pick up wins against Elon here and Marshall. Even though Marshall's going to be a very good team out of Conference USA, I think that they can grab a close win against there, but they can't be overlooking Marshall. Even though Marshall's coming to play at home against Appalachian State, this is a team that's perennially, over the last few years, been a team that has been very consistently at the top of their conference. Even though Conference USA, a weaker conference in Group of 5, and Appalachian State here has potential to take a loss if they're not careful. Then they get into conference play here with wins against Georgia State. I do think they'll drop a loss to Louisiana, who just looks to be an incredible team for Conference USA. For Sun Belt, coming in at number 23 overall. And I think they'll take a loss to Coastal Carolina to kind of wrap up a 2-game skid there before recovering nicely for wins down the rest of the stretch. Now, I think that with the consistency issues that they've had, at least last season, losing to Louisiana, Coastal Carolina, and Marshall last season, that game against Marshall, I think they definitely should have won. I think that Appalachian State is going to drop a game here that they shouldn't, a game that they definitely should win. And I'm not saying this next team that I'm going to say is going to be that loss, but I think that 8-4 is probably more probable because I think something, there's just going to be one of those games that they overlook that is too close and they end up losing. I'm going to say that game's going to be to Georgia Southern. They're going to be coming into that game, I think, pretty much out of the conference race for the top of the Sun Belt at that point. So not playing for a ton, already probably locked up for a bowl game of some form. With that game really not meaning that much and probably overlooking them, I think that they're primed for potential upset here at the end of the year against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, a team, I'll preview them in here in a second, but a team that's going to be fighting for bowl eligibility. I think they'll be a little bit more motivated in this game. Even though this game is at home for Appalachian State, I think it might be a little bit of a disappointing end of the season with an upset game there, but they'll go into a bowl game, and I think probably, depending on what the matchup is, but as long as it's another Group of 5 team, for sure be able to win that game because this is Appalachian State team that has showed success in the past, a team that I think with their current head coach here, Sean Clark, coming off of a great season after 1 year so far in the league, a 10-3 record at the school. I think he's a coach who has shown success at a high level for Appalachian State and showed it last season, and a guy who can definitely get Appalachian State to maintain that high level of success. I think that Appalachian State going forward the next few seasons is going to get back into being one of those top teams in the Sun Belt, but I do think they're going to have a little bit of an off year by their standards, which is 8-4, 5-3, which is outstanding. The Appalachian State has reached the point that 8-4 is considered an off year for them. All right, Coastal Carolina showing it clears. One of the college football darlings last season were really kind of being picked up and rooted on by pretty much everyone around the league, except for a few fans. I can name some Liberty fans that weren't big fans of that. I am a Liberty Flames fan. That was where I went to schools because Boise State didn't have an Air Force ROTC. So Coastal Carolina, of course, going 11-1 with that loss to Liberty in the bowl game. Was an incredible bowl game, one of the best bowl games I've ever watched. Very, very close matchup. They come into the season ranked number 22, which I was a little surprised by that. Not that I don't think they're worthy of being ranked number 22. 9 players back on offense, 10 players back on defense, losing their starting running back and a receiver, but pretty much all the other components in here for this team, a team that played outstandingly last season, of course going and beating BYU when Liberty wasn't able to play during the regular season, a team that has, under Grayson McCall and under head coach Jamie Chadwell, who's really turned this team around from a team that was the bottom of the leagues, I mean, in the Sun Belt and in the Group of 5 overall. I mean, they were 5-7 in 2019, and then they come out of nowhere, go 11-1, 8-0, surprise everybody. And when analyzing these teams, you have to ask: was a team that had a good year, was that a fluke? COVID did a lot of things, and one of the things it did is it had this weird effect where it made the really good teams worse, and it made the bad teams who were kind of just throwing it all in anyway. Kind of just throwing it to the wind and seeing what came out. The bad teams got better and the good teams got worse. I mean, you saw teams like Penn State kind of have off years, and then teams like Ball State win their conference, who has been not very good in their conference, win their conference, then go beat San Jose State in a bowl game, a good San Jose State team as well. So you have to ask yourself, how much of this was flukes, how much of this is teams actually turning things around. The way that Coastal played last season, they looked like a well-oiled machine. They looked like a team that was firing on all cylinders, offense, defense, and special teams. Even in that loss to Liberty, they were very, very close. I mean, they had to lose, only lost in overtime by 3 points. A lot of that had to do with some bad game decision-making towards the end of the game by Liberty that even let it go to overtime. But period, this was a great Coastal Carolina team, and I don't think last season was a fluke. Now, the Athlon is projecting 11-1, 7-1 Sun Belt, losing a game here in the Sun Belt to blemish that perfect record. I think that Coastal Carolina is going to go 12-0, 8-0 Sun Belt. They do have a couple of games here that might be challenging. Buffalo is not a guaranteed win. That's been a team that's been good in MAC, but I think it shouldn't be too much of a challenge for them. Just can't overlook Buffalo, but I think that should be a blowout win if Coastal comes in here prepared. Kansas, not an issue. Kansas is a bad team by Group of 5 standards, let alone Power 5. Appalachian State, I think, you look at the schedule, and I just don't know where Athlon thinks the losses are coming. I mean, the Citadel, that should be like a 60-7 or something win, 60-14 or something like that. Kansas, big, huge win. Buffalo, big win if they're prepared. UMass, no issue. ULM, Arkansas State, Appalachian State, Troy, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Texas State, Southern Alabama do not have to play Louisiana. this is just, I just don't see the loss coming in this schedule. Appalachian State might be the one game that ends up being a little too close to call there, and that might be where Athlon State is calling a loss to maybe Coastal dropping a game that they shouldn't. But I don't think this is a team that drops games they should win anymore. I think this is a team that gets out there, plays incredibly, has an offensive style that is one of the most interesting I've ever seen in college football. It's a combination of, they run it like the option, but they also have a little bit of up-pace spread in there as well. I mean, Grayson McCall throwing for over 2,400 yards and also rushing for over 500 yards, being the leading passer and the leading rusher, is just not something you see in teams that run an option-focused offense very often. So I'm very excited about Coastal Carolina this year. 12-0, 8-0 is what I'm projecting. Finishing the season here with a perfect regular season with a perfect record before they go into that Sun Belt Conference Championship game. All right, Georgia Southern, we talked a little bit about them earlier. 8-5 last year, so pretty good year overall by a team that's been middling to bottom of their conference here. 7-6 the season before that, so they were on an upward trend. However, they only returned 7 stars on offense, 7 stars on defense, and don't return their starting quarterback. That's going to hurt them. Athlon Sports is projecting 6-6, 4-4 overall. I'm going to say, 6-6, 4-4 Sun Belt. I'm going to say 6-6 is probably right, but I think they'll go 5-3 Sun Belt. So I think they'll drop a non-conference game that Athlon's projecting a win here. They should be able to win against Gardner-Webb. They should be able to win against Arkansas, and BYU. Sorry. They should be able to win against Gardner-Webb, and they should be able to. I got completely off track there. They should be able to win against Gardner-Webb, but I think they're going to drop games to Arkansas and BYU is what I was saying. And this game against FAU is one that Athlon is projecting that Georgia Southern will win, and I think that FAU is going to be a little better than most people are expecting. It's a team that's been able to surprise in the past, and of course it's had great seasons with some former great coaches there in the past. So I think that they might drop this game to FAU. I just don't see this Georgia Southern Eagles team as being all that good this year. So I think they can get bowl eligible with wins against Arkansas State, Southern Alabama, Georgia State, Texas State, and then a surprise upset against Appalachian State. If they're motivated, they come in, and if Appalachian State is maybe looking beyond and not prepared for them as much as they should be. But I could also see this being a team that ends up going 5-7 and missing out on the bowl season. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens there. J.D. King, a great rusher for them with over 600 yards rushing last season. I think they're probably going to lean heavily into him there with a new starting quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these Eagles teams, but I do think that 6-6 overall is fair. Georgia State Panthers, team that was 6-4 last season and 7-6 the year before that, but has perennially been really a bottom tier team, not just in their conference, but group of 5 in general. They returned 11 stars on offense and 9 back on defense. So this is a very impressively stacked team, at least as far as players that come back. Now, you have to look at the quality of those players, and that's really where the difficulty comes in. 10 interceptions to 17 touchdowns last year for their quarterback, Cornelius Brown. Athlon Sports is projecting 6-6, 5-3, and I'm looking at this schedule, and it's a tough schedule. I mean, they have to play Army, that's a loss. North Carolina, that's a loss. Charlotte should be a win, down Sunbelt team there, but they have to play Auburn, that's a loss. So really tough non-conference schedule. I mean, props to Georgia State. You often see that with a lot of these Sunbelt and Conference USA teams really going, and even the MAC, going out and scheduling really, really good non-conference opponents. So props to them for scheduling such a difficult schedule, but I don't think it's going to pay off with wins. Appalachian State's a loss. I think they can pull off winning against ULM and Texas State here, but I do think that Georgia Southern, that's going to be a loss there. I think that Georgia Southern, even though they don't return as many players, I think that they had a better season last year for them, and I think that that's going to play dividends with more momentum coming in here for this season. I think lost to Louisiana, Louisiana, Coastal Carolina, Arkansas State, and Troy are all in the cards. Troy looking to be another good Sun Belt team this year. So I think that Georgia State is better than this 3-9 record that I'm projecting. 3-9, 2-6 is what I'm projecting. I think they're better than that record, but they play, comparatively at least Sun Belt wise, a very challenging schedule, especially for what they've shown in the past. This could also be one of those teams that surprises me, especially with 11 stars back on offense. When you have a team come back like that, that's setting up for a huge amount of success, or at least the potential for that. Sean Elliott here, coming into his 5th year at the school, 22-25 overall. I think that's really the thing that's going to hold them back, is a lack of effective coaching. But overall, the talent coming back on this roster, at least the experience is what I'm meaning. Again, difficult to recruit for Georgia State, so not as much talent as compared to some other schools, but a lot of experience coming back, a chance to really show me up here and have a better season than I'm projecting. But for right now, until that evidence is shown, I'm going 3-9, 2-6. All right, Troy Trojans. Being projected 6-6, 4-4 by Athlon Sports. 5-6 last season, 5-7 the year before that. This is not the kind of team that used to go out and win 10 games like they did a few years ago. This is a team that's really been on a downhill trajectory. But 11 stars back on offense, 9 stars back on defense. This is a team that had a new coach in 2019 who didn't really get to establish himself there. His first season, you can't really blame a first season coach most of the time. And then COVID came in and wrecked so much that you almost had to give him a bye there and not really hold it against him there. So this is almost his, the way you look at it with COVID being so weird, the way it wrecked things, it was almost a practice season. So that, and the NCAA even viewed it that way to a certain extent by giving players an extra year of eligibility to come back. So really, I'm viewing this as Chip Lindsey's second year, even though it's his third year overall. I think that Troy is going to make a big step forward under him this year, returning their quarterback who threw for 16 touchdowns, over 2,000 yards. When you look at it, they're similar story to Georgia State. So 9 players back on defense, 9 players back on defense, 11 players back on offense, 11 players back on offense. Quarterback who threw for over 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 17 touchdowns, 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So they're very, very similar stories when you look at these teams overall. But I think the story is going to be different for Troy. I do think that 8-4, 5-3 is what they're looking at for a nice season coming in here. A big step forward with a chance to maybe start cementing themselves as a top Sunbelt team going forward. I think they can win a game here against Southern. A loss to Liberty, who's going to be excellent this year. Another outstanding year for them. Malik Willis is a potential Heisman dark horse according to most projections. So a very difficult game against Liberty there. I'm actually going to try and go to that game because it is at home for Troy. So any Trojan fans who disagree with my analysis, feel free to come up and say it in words. But I'm gonna be trying to go to that game. I'm excited for that. I'll be painted up as Mr. Exclamation Point. That's what I used to do when I was at Liberty. So big red body with a big exclamation point. Anyhow, drop a loss game to Liberty, especially just with the way Liberty's coming back with so many players similar to Troy. But I think Hugh Freeze is one of the top teams in the country. It's a tough game, even though Troy was able to beat Liberty in the past. Not this season, I don't think. Southern win against Southern Miss, ULM. And then here the game against South Carolina. This is going to be interesting. It's a non-conference game against South Carolina that Athlon Sports is absolutely projecting a loss. South Carolina looked terrible last season. Brand new head coach this season. I don't think they're going to have their legs underneath them. I think Troy is good enough here to go out and get that win. I'm projecting a win for Troy Trojans here against South Carolina. Going to want to be one of the big non-conference wins of the year for the Sun Belt. I'm really excited for that game. I can't wait to watch it. Wins against Georgia Southern and Texas State. So I'm projecting Troy to open up after that loss to Liberty to go on a 5-game winning streak to open up the season 6-1 here before having a difficult loss to Coastal Carolina, who again is just going to be one of those top teams in the group of 5 period, but also in their conference. Pull off winning at South Alabama, but then same story, lost to Louisiana, who again is going to be one of those top teams in their conference and the group of 5. A loss to Appalachian State, who just looks really good, has the potential to be really good, and then finish off the season win against Georgia State for a nice 8-4 record to gain themselves a nice little bowl bid here at the end of the season. So I'm excited for this Troy team, not just this season, but going forward. I'm excited to see what they can do and what Gunnar Watson can lead this team to. All right, Arkansas State Red Wolves. So this has been a team that's perennially had difficulty holding on to coaches. Their coaches kind of spread off and gone off in multiple different directions, kind of using Arkansas State as a springboard for bigger and better things. Butch Jones here is coming in for his first season. We'll see how long he sticks around. But I guess one of the benefits of that is that Arkansas State ends up getting a lot of high-quality coaches coming through, and each coach gets a chance to try and install their own vision. So it's always an exciting year for Arkansas State fans, because half the time you're coming in with all this mystery around your program. So it's very exciting sometimes to have no idea what's going to happen and have all the expectations to lean on. So last season, 4-7, not a great year. 8-5 the season before that. Kind of on a downward trend. I'll have to see if Butch Jones can turn things around. Only 6 players back on offense. Don't return the starting quarterback. Don't return the starting running back. I do think it's going to take Butch Jones to, at least 2 seasons, maybe 3, to start resurrecting this program. Athlon Sports is projecting 5-7, 4-4. I think that's fair. I'm going to agree with him on that. 5-7, 4-4. I do think they can pick up wins against Central Arkansas, South Alabama, ULM, Georgia State, and Texas State here to go on a nice 3-game winning streak, 4-1 here towards the end of the season. to really, and maybe if they have they can pull off a win here against either, well, Memphis and Washington and Tulsa aren't in the cards. I think those are going to be losses. Good teams are playing there. But if they can pull off a win against Georgia Southern is the most vulnerable, it's just a really tough schedule. I think Arkansas is better than this 5-7 record I'm projecting. I've said that a couple times for different teams, but I do think they're better than this 5-7 record I'm projecting. But Memphis, Washington, Tulsa, Coastal Carolina, and Louisiana, I mean, that is a tough stretch, and there is one game here in all these L's that looks like a potential win. Georgia Southern for sure looks like a game that I think Arkansas State can go and win. I am projecting that they're going to end up taking a loss in that one because I do think they're going to drop a game that they should win here either now or towards the end of the season, and I'm just saying get it out of the way at the front. If they can win that game, they could be looking to get bowl eligible towards the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see. A lot of hope in this program with what Butch Jones can do, but I do think it's going to take him a couple seasons to get his feet underneath him. All right, Louisiana Raging Cajuns here. And then we got 4 more teams, and then we'll be done here with our preview of the Sun Belt before we look at the overall standings. So Louisiana Raging Cajuns, number 23 overall in the preseason polls for the AP, a team that looked great last year with only one loss to Coastal Carolina and going out and getting that win against UTSA. I think Louisiana deserved a much better bowl game than that, but that's just kind of how it shook out last season with the bowl matchups being what they were and a lot of teams canceling. So they were lucky to get a bowl, and it's good that they went out and got that win. Athlon Sports is projecting 11-1, 7-1 Sun Belt. I'm looking here. They don't have to play Coastal Carolina in the regular season, which is huge for them. Now, looking at this non-conference schedule, it's very challenging. Nicholas and Ohio should not be an issue. It's not Ohio State, it's Ohio from the MAC. So that shouldn't be an issue. But they do have to play Texas, and they do have to play Liberty. Now, 10-1 last year and 11-3 this year before that. And they returned 10 stars on offense and 10 stars on defense, including their starting quarterback, who threw for over 2,000 yards last season. This is a very good Louisiana Raging Cajuns team. I do think they're going to drop a loss to Texas at Texas there, but I do think it's going to be a very close game, and they're going to be in that game with a potential to maybe pull something out in the fourth quarter, but I do think Texas is going to be the better team in this matchup. But then I think they're going to go on a winning streak here that's going to bring a lot of hope into this program that is going to help them climb high in the rankings. That game, the only game on here that I'm looking at, you have Georgia Southern, Southern Alabama, Appalachian State, that's a game to watch out for, but this is the better team. They should be able to win that one. Arkansas State, Texas State, Georgia State, Troy, all wins. Now, the one game here on their schedule, aside from Texas and aside from Appalachian State, that is going to really kind of mess with this program and give them fits is going to be my Liberty Flames. But I have to take off my Flames hat and put on my sports analysis, my neutral bystander hat here. I think Liberty is the better team in this matchup, but I think that they are going to drop this game to Louisiana. I'm projecting Liberty to beat Ole Miss. I think that they're going to be coming high off of that game. They're going to get beat up in that game because that is a big SEC team with bigger players. Liberty might even be dealing with a few injuries. The way Malik Willis plays, he might even be hurt in this one. If he's hurt, Louisiana definitely wins it. Regardless, even if Liberty comes in with a fully healthy team, if they've beaten Ole Miss the game before, I think that they're going to be not overlooking Louisiana because they're going to be a highly ranked team. But this is a very good Louisiana team who's going to be highly motivated. I think that they're going to be in the race for the New Year's Six, or they're going to know they are at least there in the college football playoff rankings. They're going to be highly motivated to win this one. I think it's a game that Liberty should win, but I think it is a game that Louisiana is going to pull off at home against Liberty there. So, sorry, at home for Liberty, but having to go on the road. I think they're going to pull off an upset, a really disappointing loss for the Flames there. But I think that Louisiana is the best team that Liberty plays this season, and they're going to be incredible. I think they're going to pull off Liberty, which is going to just pole vault them further into the rankings because Liberty, I think, is going to have a pretty good record at that point before winning against ULM here to finish off this season. And I have very high hopes for Louisiana Raging Cajuns. I'm excited about this program. Again, make sure that you like and subscribe so you don't miss my video where I preview the race for the New Year's Six. But I have a ton of excitement about this Louisiana Cajuns program and what they might be able to accomplish this season, especially with this win streak and a close loss to Texas potentially at the beginning of the season there. All right, South Alabama Jaguars. It's 4-7 last year, 2-10 the year before that, so they doubled their wins last year. But I think they're going to continue to be a bottom feeder here in their conference. They do it like most of these teams, a ton of players back, 7 on offense, 9 on defense, but they lose their starting quarterback. They lose their starting running back here. And Desmond Trotter doesn't have necessarily the lead for starter this season, even though he played pretty well last year. Athlon Sports is predicting Jake Bentley to take that starting spot. So it's going to be interesting to see if they, transfer quarterback Jake Bentley, who played really well from South Carolina. I thought he played really well for South Carolina last season. He's passed for over 8,000 yards and 61 touchdowns in his career. So he could be if he comes in and plays at the same caliber, I just don't know if he has a team around him. So Athlon Sports is projecting 4-8, 2-6, and I'm going to say 3-9, 1-7, slightly less. I think Jake Bentley is going to have a great season. I think he's going to be a great quarterback, but the defense I think is going to let up too many points, and I just don't think that he's going to have the framework around him to really develop to be the kind of level of quarter, or at least for his talent to translate into wins here for South Alabama. So I think they can grab some wins here against Bowling Green and Alcorn State and Texas State. But I do think the rest of the season, it's also a very tough season here. Losses coming against Southern Miss, Louisiana, Arkansas State, Troy, Appalachian State, Tennessee, Coastal Carolina. I think that they do have a chance to win here against Georgia Southern, ULM, to maybe get to 5-7 or even 6-6 if they can pull off a win elsewhere. But I think 3-9, 1-7 is the more likely option. However, with Jake Bentley being in this spot with a quarterback of his caliber, it's going to be so the former South Carolina 3-year starter who played at Utah last season. So sorry, I was on the wrong track there. I was thinking of somebody else. However, I have watched him play at South Carolina prior to last season, and I did watch him play at Utah last season. So a great quarterback. I think that South Alabama could be one of those teams that surprises me, that turns this 3-9 projected record into a much better year. So no one can come sleeping on the South Alabama Jaguars. Of course, an animal likes to strike in the night. So don't come sleeping in on this South Alabama team. They are going to be, I think, close in a lot of these games, but I think ultimately they're going to end up with a disappointing season with a lot of close losses here. Of course, Kane Womack here in his first season. So if he can turn things around for the South Alabama team going forward, I think that there's going to be a lot of excitement around this program in the future, but I think right now it's going to be another disappointing season for the Jaguars. Okay, Texas State Bobcats, one more team after this, and then we're done. Again, we've kind of reached the end of the top conferences in the top teams in the conference, and we're kind of looking at the bottom feeders here. Texas State Bobcats, 2-10 last season, 3-9 the year before that. Athlon Sports projecting 4-8, 2-6. I think it's going to be slightly worse than that, 3-9, 1-7. I think they can pull off some wins here against FIU, who looks vulnerable from Conference USA. Incarnate Word should not give an issue there, FCS team. And then I think they can pull off a win against ULM, who looks to be the worst team in the conference this year. But they have their starting quarterback back and their starting running back, so that's always good for them. But it is a team... And it's a team that was able to pass for almost 2,000 yards last year and 17 touchdowns. And then their Brock Sturgers here rushing for over 500 yards. So it's a team that showed some promise last season, but it just didn't translate into wins. And I just don't think that Jake I can't say his name, Spavital. I just don't think that Jake Spavital is going to show up this season for the Texas State and give them the season that this wealth of starters returning on defense, 8 back on defense and 8 back on offense, might warrant otherwise. So I do think 3-9, 1-7 is probably fair. But again, Sun Belt, very hard to predict this year because playing last season the way that they did with the COVID protocols impacting things, and the fact that there are so many players back that had really good statistical performances that didn't translate into wins. It's going to be interesting to see how that translates this year. If it's, again, high statistics, low win rate, or if it turns out being, if those stats start translating to wins for some of these teams. So again, Texas State Bobcats, a team that might surprise me. I doubt it here, not quite as promising as South Alabama with a quarterback of Jake Bentley's caliber coming in here, but I do think it's going to be a little bit of a disappointing season here for the Bobcats. So ULM, last team, 0-10 last season, 5-7 the year before that, so definitely on a steep downhill trajectory. Projected 1-11, 0-8 Sun Belt. Only 4 starters back on offense. I think the fewest amount of starters back from any team in the Sun Belt, even though there are 8 starters coming back on defense. I'm going to agree with that 1-11, 1-7. I just don't see a lot of wins, if any, on this team. I think they might be able to pull off a bit of a surprise upset against South Alabama, a game that South Alabama should win. But I do think that they might be able to pull off. And again, I'm not pegging my hat on that win against South Alabama. I think they'll be able to pull off a win somewhere on the schedule to get better than their 0-10 ranking last year to come up 1-11. but I think that might be coming against South Alabama. But I think they're going to lose to Kentucky. Jackson State looked to be a good FCS team that I think is probably going to be one of those teams that comes in and gets one of those FBS upsets. Win against Jackson State, lost here to Troy, lost to Coastal Carolina, lost to Liberty, probably a big loss to Liberty, big loss to LSU. So maybe pull off a win here against either South Alabama or Texas State or Georgia State. I think they could maybe pull off a win against one of those teams, but otherwise 1-11, 1-7 is my projection here for ULM. Okay, so overall predicted order of finish. Athlon Sports has in the East Division Coastal Carolina, Appalachian State, Georgia State, Troy, and Georgia Southern in that order. I'm going to shake things up just a little bit at the bottom of this bit, but the top part I agree with. Number 1, Coastal Carolina. Number 2, Appalachian State. I'm going to put Troy at number 3, Georgia Southern number 4, and Georgia State at number 5. Just not as good a season Athlon's projecting there for the Panthers. West Division, they've got Louisiana number 1, Arkansas State number 2, Texas State number 3, South Alabama number 4, and ULM number 5. I'm going to agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's fair exactly in the way that they just said it, with Louisiana and Coastal Carolina meeting in the conference championship game. Now, this has to be the big question. This is going to be one of the top group of 5 conference championship games all of the conference championship games, but at least if they turn out the way that I predicted them, are going to be exciting matchups that have huge stakes on the line, but especially this one. Coastal Carolina coming in 12-0, 8-0 in their division versus Louisiana 11-1, 8-0. The Athlon Sports is projecting Louisiana winning over Coastal Carolina. I think that Louisiana is going to be in a spot to play for something very, very big. Same to be said for Coastal Carolina. And I think that Coastal Carolina is probably the better team here. But I think that Louisiana, hugely motivated, a chance to play for something huge, and potentially a little higher in the rankings than Coastal Carolina, with a little better schedule, especially close loss to Texas, looking better than even a big win against Kansas by Coastal Carolina. So Louisiana, a little bit motivated, a little bit more to play for potentially here. I think that Louisiana pulls off the win against Coastal Carolina to play for something potentially very big. Again, you'll need to watch my video, my Race for the New Year's Six, for me to say exactly where I think they might stack up against the rest of the Group of 5 champions, but definitely potential here with 2 potential finishers there for competing for the New Year's Six.